Welcome back to Meet Bridget, a show that sheds light on the often untold teenage and young adult stories of successful women from all types of backgrounds and in all sorts of careers. This show is an extension of our confidence coaching service for young women. I'm Kashia Rosenberg, and I co-host the show alongside my best friend and Meet Bridget founder, CEO Asha Gabriel. This is season 4 of Meet Bridget, which has been so incredible. We've honestly been so lucky to have so many successful, articulate, diverse women who've all shared their individual pathways to success and who've really gifted our audience with their vulnerability, transparency, and so many valuable lessons and takeaways. It's actually really hard to believe, but we're closing in on the end of season 4, and we just have a few episodes left to go. So that said, I feel like this season especially has brought so many new stories forward, and our community cup is just overflowing in the best of ways. So much so that everywhere I turn lately, I've been met with inspiration after inspiration. Today's guest is one such gem. Sanaz Tamjidi, aka Sunny, is a screenwriter, producer, filmmaker, and the founder and owner of Sunny's Bookshop in Los Angeles. Inspired by her mother, Mariam Tamjidi, who followed her own passion and founded Shades of Petals, Floral and Decor, Sunny decided to fulfill her dream and open a bookstore after her nickname in the city she grew up in. She earned her BA in psychology from UCLA and went on to complete her MFA in creative writing at Antioch University in Los Angeles. And in her career in storytelling, Sunny feels inspired to incorporate her psychological and mental health knowledge into crafting stories that focus on pivotal human truths with an exciting and provocative plot. In her shop, she pours that same energy into creating a beautiful space where readers and writers can connect and celebrate storytelling with new and pre-loved books. So I am so excited to bring you onto the show. There's so much we can get into. Welcome, Sunny.
Thank you so much. It's so nice hearing all those affirmations and the whole bio. It's just so lovely.
You know, Asha just said this recently in an episode, but we really love putting these bios together because it gives us as the host some insight into our guests, and it gives obviously our listeners a little taste of what they're going to be hearing. But I also think it's so significant to just hear everything you've accomplished in like one short and it's not even everything. It's just like the spark notes of everything you've accomplished thus far. So
Exactly.
it's just so
Exactly.
cool. Well, we love getting started by going back to the beginning. I would love to hear a little bit about your childhood, where you're from, and a little bit of your background.
Definitely. I grew up in Tarzana, which is actually where my shop is located right now. And I love it. I'm a Valley girl through and through, and I'm so used to the area. Come from a very like cultural background.
Mm,
So I'm Persian and family is very important. So everything I did was very family oriented. We always had family dinners and a lot of good communication as well, which I'm very, very thankful for. Something that really shaped me as a person from the beginning was I had a speech impediment when I was
mm,
younger. So for the first couple few years of my life, I couldn't really speak that well. It was just kind of mumbled all over the place, and and the funny thing is like I wanted to speak. It was
mhm,
very evident, but I just couldn't. So that was kind of a big wake up call to me. And of course, that comes with a lot of aspects of some kind of bullyings in some way too. But
mhm.
I had the backbone of my family to really support me. And honestly, if it wasn't for them, I think I would not be the person I am today. So I give everything to them. And thankfully, I overcame the speech impediment. There was a whole surgery I had to do and everything. But once that was done, all I wanted to do was talk. even though even though it wasn't still like correctly, like the vowels weren't there completely, I
Mhm,
just wanted to talk. But interestingly, there was a time in my life that I hated words. And
mm,
because it's just the idea that I couldn't achieve it in such a
mhm,
way, I resented it. I resented some of the words that maybe other kids said to me in the past. So I had a huge enemy against words. And
Yeah.
ironically, it was actually the one thing that helped me through everything because that's where I fell in love with writing.
Yeah.
So during the time that I couldn't speak, I kept writing and I started writing poetry, small poems here and there. And as a kid, of course, it's not that in depth, but I just fell in love with it. The craft was something that really helped me. And once I overcame my speech impediment, I kind of went into different activities, but I always had writing in my heart and on the side. Even though I think, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, even though my biggest, like, I think not failure, but maybe, like, struggle that I had
Mhm.
was something that ended up becoming my greatest virtue and my greatest success. So, it's weird how life can do that to someone, especially in childhood, but it's something I think about often and something I
No,
always
I
like to
mean,
preach.
we love that too. I mean, we have this whole course built around confidence and communication, and one of the things that we found is that often, especially with all these incredible women that we've interviewed, the common thread is not what you think it would be. Like, when we started on this journey to speak to so many women and kind of extract where these successes come from and what lends to resilience and to self-confidence, it wasn't like a costume that you put on. It wasn't anything that we, might have preconceived or envisioned as like something you have or don't have. It always ended up being, hey, I made these plans and then, the loan didn't go through, or like I had to move to a different place, or I got sick and like this didn't happen, or I was bullied, and and then this whole life unfolds out in front of you, and
Yeah,
it ends up being so full of successes because of the resilience that's built from undergoing those stressors. Um, are
exactly.
you are you an only child, or do you have siblings?
I do have an older brother, and he's turning 30 actually in less than a month,
Oh,
which is really
wow.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very close to him. He is, I think, my one of my biggest role models. And again, I guess because I was raised very family oriented,
Mhm.
I just always looked up to him. I cheer him on and he does the same to me. It's a very two-way street.
I
So,
love that. Did he look
there
out
is a
for you in school?
oh, yeah. He looked out for me all the time, even today. Yeah, he's very much always by my side, and, I there was a time actually where I kind of saw his achievements, and as a younger sister and someone who admired him, I kind of wanted to go into his path in life
Mhm.
sometimes. And I so he was in the medical field, he's a doctor, and there was a time, especially high school, when you're like, "What am I supposed to do with my life?" And
Yeah.
you look at your role models. So I looked up to him, and that's where kind of I was like, "Okay, I maybe I wanna be a doctor too, maybe I wanna get into this field." So I did a couple things here and there to really, build up a resume for that, and I was happy doing it. And then in college, that's when I found psychology,
Mhm.
and I love the way that people were interacting with each other. I want to understand why people acted the way they did. And I was just very curious. So psych is where I found another passion of mine. But I think going through it all, I realized that my brother's journey wasn't supposed to exactly be my journey. So I'm thankful that I did psychology and that I did all these things towards it. But my heart always still lied in a different area, and it was always writing.
Mhm.
But it was just a very interesting path that I went on, and I don't regret it one bit. So
Yeah.
in some way, he did help me have
Yeah, he
another
really
path.
really influenced you. I think it's so interesting too because I write as well, and we write our scripts. I write creatively. I don't do it as my day job, but there's something about it, even just the action of journaling, it's so internal, right? And personal.
Definitely.
It all starts within your mind, and then you kind of bring it out onto paper and decide how you want to construct and articulate what you're saying. And it's very creative. And for me, I also really enjoy that aspect of being able to piece out the way that I would like to say something. I really love how you described that even though you had challenges with your speech impediment as a young child and you went, within, you were still finding ways to express yourself creatively and to express yourself and articulate yourself through your writing, and through your poetry and
Definitely.
your shorts. Did you ever share anything that you were writing, like when you started getting into this as a kid?
I think I did a little bit, but I think it was probably to my mom more. And, yeah, I think it was definitely from my to my mom, and she was a cheerleader. I mean, I think she still has a couple of the small little short stories that I made just somewhere in the house. And,
Oh.
yeah, it's really cute, but, I never really did anything to really, show it off when I was
Mhm.
younger. It was definitely more private. I still had a lot of private ones, but the ones that I did show, it was 100% to people that I trusted and, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's also really cool that you ended up almost accidentally, like, finding psychology because it's sort of in the medical
yeah,
field, but most people would argue that psychology is like its completely own specialty. It is its own specialty, but the brain and the way people's minds work are so different and individualized and also completely internal. I mean, you have functional MRIs that can look at what's
yeah,
happening physiologically in the brain, but it's not until you start speaking and telling those stories and listening to other people's narratives that you really get a sense of personality and ideas and hopes and dreams and everything. And so that's another really cool
definitely.
connection that I'm seeing form here that, as a writer and as somebody who it sounds like you're a little bit more introverted initially, that's how where you found your interests, like rather than like biology or, physiology or chemistry, you found
Yeah,
psychology and it really still is in that vein of storytelling.
definitely. I think psychology helped me even in writing today because I primarily write psych thrillers
Hmm.
and, very twisted plot
Wait, I
lines.
love this.
So I love that whole idea. I think the weirder the better. So it's just I think understanding because I was focusing on social psych more. It was
Hmm.
social and clinical psych. And I loved both of them. So you really understand a person when you go into those subcategories. And it was just interesting.
For our listeners who are not so familiar, and even for myself, can you kind of walk us through what the differences are in that?
Oh, definitely. So social psych is you kind of understand more about the social pain of people. So you really do look more internally, I feel like, as a social psych major. And there's very much targeting behavior of maybe even environment on a micro level, macro level. So it's very much what's around you and how that person responds in social settings, of course, as well, and how they also connect to people socially. Clinical psych is more on the terms of maybe there is something internally that there is a diagnosis that needs to be addressed. There's maybe clinical psych is when you also get into other I don't like to say disorders as much anymore. I do
Hmm.
like to say someone who's undergoing some kind of, mental illness or something that's affected by them. So maybe schizophrenia, right? That's
Hmm.
when you go into those subcategories as well. So it's very much scientific. I know it's so
Hmm.
bad to say that one's more scientific than the other, but clinical psych is way more a little bit more on the science side where you're kind of also tackling more with maybe medicine
Hmm.
and social psych is sometimes not always the case where you need medicine or it's just a different type of therapeutic way of addressing
Yeah.
it.
Kind of integrating what you know about a person against their community and their social structure, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, speaking of community and social structure, when when you were in school, Did you have a lot of friends? Were you very introverted? Did you have hobbies? Did you play sports? Or was it just you're like very into writing and
I would say in the beginning of my childhood when I couldn't speak as well, I was maybe a little introverted in some ways. I do remember that, but I think I ended up becoming very extroverted. And my mom says this all the time where I'm going to bring up my mom quite a bit,
yeah, yeah.
but
No, I love it.
she does tell me a lot. She says, "Yeah, you always wanted to talk and you always wanted to come into everyone's business." And I'm like, "Oh God." I'm like, "Oh boy, that's gonna be a problem." But I definitely love to interact with people. And even today, I love meeting new people. I love conversing about anything, and I think there's just something about it that it just makes me very intrigued, and I think maybe that's a little bit of the writer in me, where
Yeah.
I meet someone for the first time and I kind of wanna nibble facts and information from them. I know I have a lot of friends who are, writer friends who are maybe on the opposite side where they're, like, observing more and they don't they don't
Mhm.
wanna get into it, but, I think I'm a little bit on, like, the spectrum of, like, trying to really dive into
Yeah.
conversations with people and get
It's so
info.
it's so funny that you mentioned that because the first time I went into your bookshop, I feel like I am the person to, like, read the room and I have to, very much project myself, which is funny because 'cause I'm hosting
Mhm.
this show. But I remember walking in and, like, kind of, like, going around, like, physically, like, being a wallflower and just kind of, like, looking at things, and you were in there with your mom, and so I
Mhm.
gathered you were the owner of the shop and everything, and you just had this warmth and presence about you, and there were people
Aw.
coming in and talking to you, and you were so upbeat, so I can definitely see how what you're describing of yourself and your personality really rings true.
Aw, thank you.
How old were you? You mentioned you did have to have surgery for your speech impediment. How old were you when you underwent that?
I always get mumbled with the mumbled,
Yeah.
jumbled, I don't know what that word is, but I always get confused with exactly what age it was. I A part of me wants to say, like, 5 or something
Yeah.
like that, but, it was early on. The
Mhm.
weird thing is I do remember it.
Mhm.
So a part of me also tells myself that it's definitely a time where I can really remember
Remember
things.
things.
So, yeah, I do remember actually even going into the room and be like, "Why is this happening to me?" So it was a
Oh,
I know, it was really weird, but, of
old enough to
course.
know something's going on, but not quite old enough to understand why.
Exactly, exactly, yeah. The funny thing is when I did have the surgery, I think it was kind of hard to understand that it was for my speech specifically as well.
Mhm.
So even afterwards, it still did not sound very coherent.
Mhm.
So it was like a journey to really have it in a place where I was comfortable. And it got to the point that actually I did end up practicing a lot. My mom, she
Mm.
helped me quite a bit, and from reading, actually, from reading, from writing. So I had storytelling always around me in some way because it helped me actually come out of my shell in some ways. I ended up going on, having speeches on the speech debate teams in school, and it was such a weird turn of events how it happened, but I think my drive to really speak helped me and to do those things that I couldn't do earlier.
Wow. Did you realize that that's what was happening? Did you have like a fire inside of you that was like something was off
Yeah.
prior to the surgery? So now let me just, explode onto the scene?
Yeah, I think also I remember you because in the past when I couldn't really speak so well, it was like the vowels weren't really working. So after the surgery, my mom even told me, she's like, you just wanted to speak all the time. And I think that and I just remember always wanting to say everything that's on my mind as well. But it was definitely a drive. And then I think once I also got a little older, I realized that I definitely wanted to work at it. I wanted to do something where people didn't recognize me as
Mhm.
someone who couldn't really have a good speech. And
Yeah.
it was just that I kind of went into other aspects of my life too. I concentrated my energy maybe in I did piano, I did dance lessons, art lessons. It was very much me wanting to show people that this one little struggle wasn't who made me as a
Mhm.
person. Even though, to be honest, today I actually see that even though I wanted to kind of quiet it down, it is who made me, right? Because
Mhm.
it was because of my speech impediment that maybe I fell in love with writing. And I
Mhm.
actually said that in my admissions essay when I was going into my MFA program in creative writing. So it was a very reflective time where I told myself, no, like this is what I went through, but it had to have happened because I would have never picked up that pen. I would have never
Mhm.
looked internally, right? So,
Yeah, it's so symbolic. It's like you really had something to say and you really have, these stories to tell and to share. And so I love just thinking about the growth and change that was happening for you from a very early age through school years and up until college even. And now, I mean, the work that you do at your bookshop, which I'm so excited to get into, you guys host all of these events and you bring other
mhm,
voices onto the scene and really just are constantly trying to highlight new artists and new people in the community and just really lift others around you. And that's so beautiful. So, did you always have a sense then well, I guess, I mean, you did talk about thinking about going to medical school and then you got into psychology, but did you ever just have a moment before going into college where you thought, I'm just going to be a writer, that was even an option?
no, I honestly, if I keep telling people, if you told me that I was gonna open a bookshop, I was gonna become a writer, I was gonna make a film, like 2 years ago, I'd probably laugh and be like,
Really?
"You're" yeah, I'd be like, "You're talking about someone totally different. That is not me." It was very, like, out of the park for me. It was something that I never even thought of. I was working actually for a mental health, research group and, after college, and I loved it. It was really sweet, and we were actually looking at different orphanages and trying to see just the development of the kids back then, and I remember one of the people who worked in the program, she was very sweet. She was one of the leaders there, and she came to me and she said, "Oh, there's a day that when we wanna show the kids something, can you write something for them? Maybe like a story?" And she didn't know I liked writing at all.
Hmm.
So it was just very much like, "Can you do this activity?" And I said, "Oh, I actually write a little poetry." And so she says, "Oh, that's amazing. Can you write something?" So I wrote this whole, um, poem about just what these kids were going through and, like, having a better life for themselves. And, they came to me afterwards and they said, What is this? Like, we didn't know you can write." So it was really interesting. That job kind of had 2 jobs to it because they ended up telling me to write more of
Hmm.
these poems for them. So it was really interesting, actually. I think doing that, it made me realize how much I missed writing because back in college, I didn't shamefully, I didn't read as much, like, fiction, right? It was very science-based. I didn't really read the books I wanted to read, and I
Hmm.
didn't write. I couldn't write the stories I wanted to write as well. So, being able to do that in the job I had was really interesting, and it was, like, a little bit of a wake-up call because I was trying to look into graduate programs for psych as well, and in the middle of everything, my mom, she noticed something was different about me. She came to me, she sat me down, and she said, "Listen," and this is when my mom was doing her floral designs, right? Because
Hmm.
she was my mom, a little bit about her, she was in the finance market and stock market trader, and during her retirement, she went to the floral business. So she's the definition of following your dreams no matter what age. And she sat me down and she told me, "Listen, if I was able to get out of my job just a few years ago, you can do it early on too. And she was the one that kind of pushed me, and she brought up the idea. She said, "Why don't you look into master's programs for English?" And I'm like, "English?" I'm like, "Mom, what are you saying? I've never even thought of something like that." I'm like, "English?" It was very confusing. And she's the one who told me. She said, "Listen, you love to write. You've always written even when you were a little girl." And it was like that moment of, wow, I didn't realize it until someone had to tell me, but I love that that someone was my mom.
Yeah.
And it was within the home, within the family that brought me to my actual dream.
I love this so much because so often, especially with like very culturally diverse families, I'm first gen
Mhm.
American, you hear sort of the opposite. You hear like from people that have creative loves or want to pursue creative things. So often you hear that their parents, really didn't see something like writing or
Mhm.
film or dance or modeling as a career. And, I think one of the things that this particular generation nails now is that you can do anything you wanna do, and there's a way to monetize everything. And,
Yes.
like, you can go to
Yes.
school and become really successful, or you can, make millions on TikTok. Like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
such a wild time to be alive, but I think it's so beautiful, like you said, that your mom is the one that actually encouraged you to take on what you loved, and it, also came from her own lessons of starting in a completely different path. That's so very
Definitely.
cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just it's been, I think, one of the most rewarding and fulfilling journeys I've had in my entire life. Just being able to have the shop, being
Mm.
able to work with my mom
Yeah.
and do it together, and having my writing as well. It's very, I tell people, I have two careers now, which is mind-boggling, and it's like two careers that intertwine with each other, right? It's not like, I'm a psychologist and I'm also doing writing. No, I'm a writer. I'm also a bookseller. It's beautiful, and that's why I'm like, when if someone told me this 2 years ago, I wouldn't believe them.
Yeah, yeah. So you went through your MFA, you graduated, you wrote, directed, and produced this film?
So I produced, wrote, also edited as well, and co-editing. But my director is Sarah Phillips.
Mhm.
She's amazing, and kudos to her. She just grabbed my vision from the script and she made it happen. So yeah, it's been a great team.
Tell us about how that particular film was brought to fruition.
I actually got into my MFA in creative writing in Antioch as a fiction major. The first, I think, first semester or so, it was fiction based. And even actually, the first year, I would say, was just fiction.
Mhm.
And I took an elective class for screenwriting because my mentor at the time, she said, "You write good dialogue. You should look into maybe scripts and screenwriting." So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And I took this one class, and it was a whole different teacher, very different from fiction. I thought it might be very similar, but no, it was a whole different format. And the whole objective of the class was just write a short film, like as if you were gonna have it on the screen. So I said, okay, I'll think of something. And I kind of went back to my roots a little bit. I thought about psychology and I said, well, I want to really tackle something that has a human truth
Mhm.
and kind of tackles an important message. So my whole short film is surrounding the trauma of human trafficking for little girls. And it was just something that I wanted to really tackle on, but in a way that was also, as I said, I love weird stories. So I wanted to put something really weird in it. It's a psych thriller, but it has a good message and it's fun and entertaining to watch. So I wrote the whole script in that one elective class. as a fiction major. It was my first ever script. And I remember the mentor of that class, who has become one of my dearest friends and biggest supporters as well in my whole writing career. Her name is Colette Friedman. And she's the one who she put me aside. She told me, listen, I think this should be made into a movie. I think you should pursue screenwriting. And just having that affirmation from someone who's in the field already was such an opening door for me
Yeah.
where I believed it too. And we did it together. She was actually one of the producers on the film. And one of the best experiences, we just shot the film, I think it was close to a year ago now. It was last November. And it's from then on I've been writing more, producing more, which is great.
I love this so much, and it really is special that, again, you had a woman that you really admired step in and give you that bit of just that nugget of, like, truth, and that, you know, it catapulted you into this direction. It really goes to show how far the voices in our life can take us, and how great it is when you're surrounded by the right people, by loving people, and you get to just continue sharing what you love to do. I can't wait
Definitely.
to share. Is the film available for our guests to watch?
It will be. We are in post-production right now, so it's being edited. It's getting those last minute details,
Yeah.
but we're going to be submitting to festivals soon. So hopefully when that happens, I will definitely let you know, and then I would love for you to share it. It'll be
Yeah,
beautiful.
that would be fantastic. So, where in all, like, you've been busy for the last several years. You got your MFA, you found a director, you worked on this film, it's now in post-production, and you've opened up your bookshop. So, how did that come into fruition?
So, the bookshop was, I think, like a cherry on top of everything. I it was it was something that I think as a girl, it's like the feminine urge to open up a bookstore and then, of course, have a flower shop. It was really nice and I had good timing because my mom, she's a floor designer. So,
Mhm,
she had this workshop, this studio, and then she wanted to become more accessible to the public because she did events earlier. So she was looking for a retail space. One of her good friends, Gasia, who
mhm.
owns Landry Coffee, she's in Tarzana as well, and we became close with her. She used to carry my mom's dried flowers, and it was such a beautiful partnership too, and it was just so great. And she kind of told us, she said, "Listen, there's a space open right next to me." My mom, she was looking into it, and I think one conversation led to the other. My mom ended up telling me, "Listen, you love books. You always talk about how you want to open up a bookstore. You should do it now." And I was like, wow. Not only did my mom pursue me into writing, but she pursued me to open up this shop. So it's just so interesting that she's honestly the one who's like putting me on my path. And of
Yeah,
course, my brother and my dad too. I love them so much, and they've been the backbone as well for everything. And so when I was trying to have the bookstore, it was very much like, okay, now I have to really think seriously, like what type of books do I want to carry? How am I going to get the resources to have this actually come into fruition? I would have to say it was definitely my MFA program, Antioch
mhm,
University. They pulled through. They showed me different outlets. They helped me become friends with different writers. And it was one of those moments where I told myself everything happened for a reason, right?
mhm,
Me getting my degree helped me open up this shop as well. There was
mhm.
no way I could have opened up this shop if I wasn't getting my MFA in creative writing.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it just all came together so seamlessly, and the space itself is so intentionally curated. Like, it is so beautiful because you walk in and it feels like you're walking into a vignette. Like, the front of the store is flowers and goods and small gifts, and it's just really beautiful. And then in the front, you have all of your books, like that you feature for, the week or the month. And then the bookshop itself, which sits behind this floral studio, is just so cozy, but with such beautiful, like aesthetically pleasing written works. And you have a kids corner, and it's basically just like a little slice of heaven. I mean, you walk in, it's so
Oh,
peaceful and lovely, and it is attached to a delicious coffee shop who some of you may or may not
yes.
recognize Garcia's name, founder and owner of Ladry Coffee. By the way, still the only female roaster in the valley, I believe. But
Yeah,
it's
I
just
think so.
incredible, this little community that you are building and have built, and with your mom at your side, which is really powerful. We've had maybe one other guest on the show that has been so deeply influenced and is in business with her mom as well. And
Mhm.
it's really beautiful to hear when you get to do something like that with your mom. I mean, what could be more special?
It's honestly very special, and, it's beautiful because she was honestly the one who helped me in everything in my life, I
Hmm.
believe, and she's my best friend, and people always tell me, "Don't you get bored? Like, you're seeing her at work, and then you see her at home," and I'm like, "Not at all." I'm so thankful, and I recognize how special that is, and that's not
Right.
always the case. So I don't take it for granted. I always do try to see it as what it is, and it is a blessing. So it's just something that's great too. And I don't think I could have ever gone into business with anyone else, honestly. I think even though and I'm not we have our moments, right? Mother
Yeah.
and daughter moments where we would like argue over something, but it's like at the end of the day, we always have each other's heart and
Mhm.
our, possessions at heart. So it's very much family oriented even within the business. It's
Yeah.
it's just it's one of the best things.
It sounds so wonderful. Now, with your mom, you did mention, sometimes you have your things, and I think in every business with a business partner, there are challenges that can arise because
Yeah.
naturally humans have conflict. How do you and your mom navigate when things pop up or you guys have disagreements? Like, how do you foster communication and get through moments like that?
I mean, communication is very much key, and I know not all the case that is the case where it's like you just want to go into your own space and just not talk to the other person. But I think when it does happen, we try to be understanding. We try to see what that person is saying, what we're saying to each other. The nice thing is we do understand where our own priorities also stand. So I
Mhm.
think as a little advice, anyone who ever actually wants to go into business with their family as well, have your own duties, but your own obligations, and
Mhm.
let them have their own obligations. So my mom, she is the flower side, and she does all her flowers. I help her time to time, but at the end of the day, she very much has her own, idea about it.
Mhm.
Whereas when I do the books, I'm very much I know what I have to do for the books. I know that this is my task to do. And just being able to have those, like lines where it's like
Mhm.
she does this, I does that helps a lot too. And of course, when we get into those small arguments, it is about understanding. It's about sitting down with the person, asking them questions, and not being like, it's so easy to be like, "Oh, mom, like you can't do that," or like, "Why are you saying that to me?" But think of it as like actually an actual partner. So a lot of times I sit down and say like, "Can you actually describe like why this can't happen this way or why?" So it's a
Mhm.
very much asking questions. I'm very much for that. And I was raised on that. We're not the household to have closed doors or disappear into your room. We really want to tackle the situation on. It was just being raised like that from the beginning. But I think just be open and honest as well.
I
Obviously, we have a generation difference. So
Yeah.
it's being open and honest is key too.
That's great advice, and I really love how you articulated how you and your mom navigate that because I think it's so true of any partnership, like you said. leaning into conflict with curiosity instead of having closed doors really goes such a long way. And especially you'd think that going into business with a family member would make things much more complicated. Often the people closest to us get the brunt of like the bad emotions. But I think you're
Mhm.
describing something really powerful where on the flip side, if you nurture it, you can be a power couple or a power duo because you actually have a really firm understanding of where the other person's values lie. And that's so
Exactly.
essential to a strong partnership, I think. Is having that strong foundation is really being able to understand. And then to build on it is to be able to communicate in such an open way.
Exactly. Definitely.
So I'm sure as a business owner and as a writer and somebody creative, there are days where you might experience like a block in your creativity or perhaps like just a bad day of business where like things don't move as seamlessly as you feel like they should. Do you have any examples of that? And if so, how do you navigate those moments? Do you go back to your writing or do you utilize meditation or mantras or things like that?
There's 2 things. I listen to music a lot, and I do that because I listen to music when I write.
Mm.
So, whenever I write, I would put on some kind of instrumental or some kind of music that correlates to the type of vibe and aura that I'm
Mhm.
writing in, and that helps me so much. So, whenever something's kind of happening, I actually do tend to listen to music because it does help me a lot. It's like almost that situation of like I'm writing when I'm not writing. So I
Mhm.
think that's why it's just the comfort of knowing that there's something that I'm listening to. And then also, I do fall on writing a lot. Whenever something does happen, so if it's in the shop, for example, I would come home and I would write, and it doesn't have to be so, like my novel or anything. It would just be something that I'm writing about, anything in that moment. And then vice versa, if I have writer's block, which is almost any writer I know experiences at some point. Whenever that happens, I would then actually go to the shop. So
Oh, so a
it's
change of
very
scenery.
it changes. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very different. And I think that happened actually a couple of days ago when I was at home and I dedicated, that day to be home and do my writing. And then it just wasn't working for whatever reason, just wasn't working. And I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm gonna come to the shop actually." And she's like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, like just, just change of scenery." And being able to go there was also a little bit like a safe haven. So they're both safe havens for me.
Mm.
Going to the shop and also going into my own space for writing, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's great. It's that change of scenery that just really kind of creates the switch, which is fantastic. Do you have any advice for young writers or novice writers that, want to start and don't know where to start? Or, who are trying to organize their day? You mentioned that you designate some time to that. And I think one of the challenges of having creative work sometimes can be that it's not the same as having a 9 to 5. And so it's not like you have somebody leaning over you. I mean, you might have a publisher, but you really at the end of the day have to drive your own process. So do you have any advice or anything that you do to stay on top of the cadence of your own creations?
Definitely. I do tend to separate at least some days or some hours to either that being working remotely for the shop or going actually physically in the shop. So
Mhm.
I kind of tell myself, okay, this is something that I'm going to be doing because they're both priorities now in my life. And then there's days that I dedicate to writing and my creative vision as well. So being able to just have that difference, I think helps me a lot personally as well. I know that for me, finding a right time and a right setting. So I love writing at night. And I think that's just because I had a whole day of interacting with people. So I feel inspired
Yeah.
whenever something happens and meeting new people. So when I go, at night, I go to my bed, or, it's one of those moments where I have so much inspiration that I just want to put out on paper. So it's about really figuring out when you feel the most inspired. Setting has so much to do to it. I love a dim light room. And it's just creating a very comfortable space. I know a lot of times it's hard, especially with work, but having that moment for yourself when you want to write, it goes a long way. So just being
Yeah,
able
just
to
carving out that
recognize what
time.
you like. Yeah.
That's beautiful advice. Well, I am so excited that you have taken the time out of your multiple jobs and your busy life and building what you're building to sit with us and to share your stories and to share some of your biggest takeaways and learnings and to also share this beautiful relationship, both personal and business, with your mother. It's really been such a treat to sit and talk with you. And I'm sure there are going to be many more instances where I try and pull you in to pick your brain now that you're part of the Meet Bridget community.
Oh, I love
So,
that.
as we close your interview, I wanted to transition into something we call our Fast Five. And it's just a fun little shake off to an otherwise, it was a very fun conversation, but, more serious and more of a deep dive. So we're going to go a little bit more light and fun. So if you're ready, we'll
Okay.
we'll transition into that Fast Five. So, number one, what is an unexpected joy of owning a bookshop?
The people that walk through the door, honestly, the types of people.
I love it. It must be so fun to just have all different characters come in, all because everyone likes different things, So it's like you get to it's that psych part of you, I bet. You get to see
Yeah,
what
I'm
everyone
very
likes and
my
gravitates
my
towards.
curiosity just
Mhm.
flies through the roof every time someone walks through.
Okay, you are attached to one of the best coffee shops like in the world. What is your go-to coffee order?
Oh, this is funny because everyone who works there and who comes to my shop makes fun of me for it. Uh, so I get an iced matcha latte, with a splash of chai, a little bit of vanilla, and then a vanilla cloud on
Oh my
top,
God,
which
it's
is
so
like a
specific.
cream. It's very with 2% milk.
You'll have to take a
That's
picture and
why.
send that to me because that actually sounds like a total vibe. Like,
It's the best. I mean, when I say they make fun of, it's just in love because, like,
yeah.
right when I walk through the door, they always say, like, "Oh, it's your matcha drink." Like, I'm
Oh
like,
my
"Yep,
God.
it's that one." So,
I very rarely order matcha, but I think I might try that this weekend.
it's
Okay.
really good. Yeah.
Number three, favorite book of all time or currently?
Ooh, I would say Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn.
It's so
Yeah,
good. It is. And again,
so
it's
good.
that psychological thriller.
Yeah, I think, her writing actually helped me, write in the way that I do. So, I'm a fan. I loved
I
it.
love it. I also love the genre. I'm sure we can
Mhm.
geek out about this.
100%.
Number number four, favorite film of all time and or currently.
That's so funny because I just watched it 2 nights ago again for, like, the 1,000th time, and that's Phantom of the Opera, the 2004 film
Oh, oh
with
my God.
with yeah, with Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum.
I haven't seen that in so long. That is a banger. That is a really good one.
The best. I mean, I it's just that film is just so good in so many ways.
Yeah,
So that
it
one
is.
for
It's like that
sure.
quirky. It's a little weird.
Yeah,
It's romantic. Okay, I'm getting
yeah.
your artistic vibe here. I like it. Okay, number five, a book or a film that has changed or defined your life.
Ooh, that is very interesting. That's a good question. I don't know if there was any book that I read that was like, "Oh, that's me." I wanna lean into Gone Girl again because that made me who I am as a writer as well. Because I
Yeah.
I kept flipping through the pages to get inspiration in the way to write, how I write.
Yeah.
So I would say on a writing way, artistic way, I would say Gone Girl. But I'm sure there's another book I've read and I'm like, that's so me, and it's just flying through my head right now.
Oh, I love it. I'm that person, like, I'll go back and revisit books that I just love, or I'll send somebody like, Amazon makes things so easy, and I'm so sorry because I know small bookshops are like
Okay.
but, like, when I wanna send something to somebody, like, it's like, "Here you go. Like, I just read this and I wanna share this with you." I'll start buying
Yeah,
from Sunny's
exactly.
Bookshop and mailing it. Support our local bookstores.
Do it. Do it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have one last question that we ask all of our guests before we close our interview. What was one quality you had as a young girl or young woman that you might not have taken pride in or recognized at the time, but you look at now and you really appreciate that it's part of who you are?
It's weird, but I would say my speech impediment probably. I think just having a struggle helped me understand who I am as a person. So I think in some ways what I'm saying is that whatever challenge or struggle that you're going through, you might look at it as a bad thing when realistically, if you kind of find a way around it and through it, that it's going to end up becoming something that helps you in the long run of something you're actually going towards. So I would say that in some ways.
I love that so much. It's such beautiful advice, and I think it rings so true. You are such a resilient woman. You are so
Oh,
creative and cool and warm and fun, and it has been such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. And thank you for creating a safe space for other creatives in the community and lifting up other artists and just showcasing, the things that people pour their hearts into, which is their artwork. I really love it so much. And it's always so exciting to meet somebody who also loves words and weird things.
thank you.
Well, we are going to link everything from the bookshop to your bio to Color Wheel so that people can keep an eye out for all of your projects coming up, and just follow Sunny's Bookshop on Instagram so that they can see what you're doing, and maybe join some of the events that you guys host on an almost weekly basis.
Yeah, it's becoming weekly, which is
Yeah.
interesting and nice at the same time.
Yeah. It's so great. Well, thank you so much for being on our show. It has been such an honor.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. This was honestly so nice, and thank you for coming in the store and just being able to see you first was so precious.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll be seeing more of each other, I'm sure. Fellow book lover here.
Definitely.
All right, everyone. Until next time, thanks for listening in.